Back again.
Here we are,
Good
once
morning.
again.
I feel like we need to work on our introduction.
What do you mean?
I know we're 100 episodes into this project, but maybe we should have some kind of intro.
It's funny because I actually put a couple of our episodes through either ChatGPT or Claude.
Yeah.
And one of the first recommendations it made was come up with a standard intro.
Come with a stat.
So
all right.
See?
I have one for my class on Wednesdays.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I have the same
You
statement.
say
I
the
do.
same thing
Yeah,
every
it's Wednesday afternoon, 12 o'clock here in Long Beach,
Oh,
California,
my
which
God.
only mean one thing. Another exciting class with Rabbi Perelmuter
my
and his
God.
merry men and women of this class. Give a shout out,
Oh
ladies and
my
gentlemen.
God.
And they all go, woo. They all crack up.
And they're all 100 years old. So
Not
it's funny.
so. Come on. They're 90s. They're in their 90s. Don't push them over the
it's
100.
it's a really nice class.
There's not, you know what? More young people are coming to it.
Oh, good.
I got some young people
Oh,
are coming
good.
to it. But 12 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah.
You're not
But
getting.
can you believe we've done 100 episodes?
No.
That's where
We
at.
have
Yeah.
100
Yeah.
episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I-
you're
I-
97 because we don't invite you to some of them.
No
But-
kidding.
Right.
I
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
I didn't think
Strategically.
we'd get past 5, to be honest with you. But
Listen,
Most
I
I
give
think the
it-
statistic is most podcasts don't get past like 3 or 4 episodes.
really,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
so
give the credit to Jay.
Oh, that's nice. Of course
Yes.
you do.
No, Jay was the one that initiated this.
Yeah,
Let's
it's
be
true.
honest.
It's
Come on.
true. It is
It
true.
came from Jay's
It's
inspiration.
true.
it's a team effort. Go team.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
my father and I are experts. 45 years running where we have a lot of ideas and really good ideas.
We already have
And
6 books.
We have meetings about those ideas because we're good about the meetings too. It's just then executing the idea. That's where we struggle. But this actually we did, and you're
No, I
right,
didn't.
probably because Jay was here and involved.
That's-
So
I mean, if it was me and you, we'd cancel every second Tuesday. No, I can't. I can't.
can't.
Today, my tire is flat, and it really is. So I can't come today. We'll do it next week. Okay, yeah,
it's so
fine.
true.
But the
That's
fact
what
that
I-
we have Jay from Rhode Island,
yeah,
we have to.
we show up.
That's what I tell my clients is you can sit there and think about strategy forever,
Yeah.
but a well executed average strategy is much better than a poorly executed great strategy.
Oh, yeah.
So
That's
for
so
sure.
true.
That's
Gotta get-
100% true.
Here we
Well,
are.
today is an interesting day in the United States of America. Jesse Jackson passed away.
Right.
There was a
Jesse
civil rights
Jackson.
leader.
He was actually
read-
younger than I thought. He was 84, I think I read.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I thought
I
it was.
thought he was in his 90s for sure. but-
That's funny because I always thought of him as a young man.
Oh, really?
Because you think of him in the 80s when he ran for
Right,
president, was an unbelievable speaker.
Yeah.
He was very eloquent. He had that,
Yeah.
he had it down pat. He had
Yeah.
that in a way that Martin Luther King charisma around him. He just,
Yeah, but not quite Martin Luther
not
King.
quite Martin
but
Luther
yeah.
King, but
Yeah.
simply had that tone of the way that.
He was also a reverend?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Yes, he
right.
was. Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he came saying, like was born in the South and went to college, then went to the theology school,
Mm.
joined the movement early on, became very attached. He was very fond of him, Dr. King.
Yeah, yeah.
Very fond of him.
Right.
And and
He
did
it's very hard because Jay and I listen to a podcast that we're both big fans of called The Fifth Column. And Michael Moynihan, who's one of the hosts of The Fifth Column, he does an impression of Jesse Jackson. And now I can't take anything Jesse Jackson says seriously because all I hear is Michael Moynihan's impression of Jesse Jackson. And it's actually really funny. So I'm sad that he passed away, I guess. I don't know. He didn't really affect my life, but sad. He was definitely a big public figure.
He was, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that leads to our conversation.
That's a
today.
perfect
I
segue
know.
into what
Yes.
we're talking about today.
Definitely divine providence that we're talking about this topic today. So,
Yes, for sure.
Jay, do you want to introduce our book topic for?
Yeah, so
episode?
we've got our next education book club episode here, and this time we read a book called Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, which I will just editorialize for a second. So I've read, I don't reread a lot of books, but this is probably the 4th time that I've read Up from Slavery. It is truly not just one of the greatest autobiographies, but I think one of the most important books in American history. And the fact that more people aren't exposed to it, especially kids, I think is a shame. So I'm glad we're talking about it, because it is one of my very small handful of favorite books I've ever read. So Booker T. Washington was born in 1856 as a slave in Virginia. He was emancipated when he was 9 years old. He would go on to become educated, somewhat self-educated, some institutional education, and ultimately in 1881, he would found the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, which he ran for the rest of his life. He passed away in 1915. And the Tuskegee Institute was an educational facility that helped emancipated Black people both gain skills, gain trades, but also just sort of learn how to live in, quote unquote, civilized society, because they'd never been taught that. And so we're going to talk about his autobiography that he wrote called Up from Slavery here.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
you just took care of my first question, because I was going to ask you, why did you want us to read this book?
I think two
why
things.
you wanted to read this. Yeah.
So I think it's two things. A, obviously, as I said, I have a particular affinity for this book, but I also think that there's a lot of lessons that he takes from his life that I think are Jewish in some regards. And this reading of the book, as I was reading it, I was thinking, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but I think if he knew the Rebbe, they would probably actually be friends, and they would agree on a lot of things around how to live your life. I don't know what you guys think about that, but
it's hard to disagree with that. I mean, this is far from my field of expertise.
Yes.
I mean, reading this book, I've read some stuff about the Civil War, and I'm interested in that period about the Civil War and slavery and this, but it's certainly not something that I feel very confident, to talk about in an expert fashion. But he was certainly an incredible human being. Besides everything else in the world that was going on, the fact that from where he came from, such abject poverty that he describes. I mean, it's so hard for us to even to realize how people lived that way. And this was not in the 14 and 13, 1200s. This was in the United States of America in the mid of the 19th century. I mean, where people were living in big mansions, and you'd see, you go through the South, and all of that. And these people were like it was just incredible. I mean, the kind of poverty and the uneducation that, these people had. And for someone like him to do this on his own, I mean, literally by a force of character, to say to himself, I'm not just going to just allow myself to fall back and do nothing. I'm going to make something out of myself. And the difficulty, of that, and how he had to struggle through every single step of the way, even to get his first formal years of education, where he had to work in the coal mines. Was it in West Virginia? I believe that he was, his family moved after emancipation, working in the coal mines, and then just learning how to read on his own, and just fighting every step of the way to be able to better himself. And like you said before, to learn how to live in a new world where he wasn't a slave anymore, and he could make it on his own, albeit this was not always a very welcoming world to him. I mean, and then he went back south, which he didn't have to. He could have gone north and lived in Boston or New York, which was friendlier to the freed slaves, but he didn't. And he went right back to where he had come from, and felt this incredible responsibility of doing something not only for himself, but also for the people, the freed slaves. I mean, just like you said, Jay, like he wanted to really help the emancipated slaves to make a better life for themselves. And it's incredible. I mean, it's incredible.
The thing that stuck out for me, and for sure in the beginning of the book when he's describing his childhood, is just like the juxtaposition of our kids today and how he managed to get through life. I mean, I don't remember exactly how old he was, but a young teenager when he's like traveling to go get some education, and he has no money, and he's like sleeping underneath the sidewalk. I remember that scene where he like just finds a place underneath the boards of the sidewalk to rest for a little bit so he can sleep. I mean,
and no food.
No food. I mean, I just can't. I love my boys. Like, I love them so much, but they can't do anything like that. I mean, and they haven't had to, thankfully, and neither have I. So maybe if we were facing those kinds of situations, we would also persevere, but it's really hard for me to imagine. I have a nephew, Ellie, who's 10. I mean, can you imagine Ellie, like, getting from Long Beach to LA, but on his own? Like, these things are just, it's just that piece of it. And we were kind of talking about it when I drove you here, that the world has changed so drastically just with comfort, and what's available to us. And when reading that book, it really struck me how easy life is for us and our kids. It's
in a
really
way,
interesting.
In a way, I've always said about these people like Booker T. Washington, the historical figures in American history, that I hate them.
Wow, that's a take.
And I hate them. I'll tell you what I mean. Let me explain what I mean. I said the same thing about Simon Wiesenthal when we discussed his book, that I hate these people. Why? Because they force us to really dig deep into ourselves in places that we really don't want to go. I mean, they are literally holding us to a mirror, and are saying to us, okay, look, he's not Moshe Rabbeinu, Booker T. Washington, and God didn't come down and reveal himself to him. He's not King David, all this. But here's a simple person that persevered against the longest of odds. I mean, if you had make a bet, if FanDuel was around back in days, and looked at Booker T. Washington when he was 11 and said, this guy is going to one day get up there and he's going to change the world, what are the odds? Less than the Patriots winning the Super Bowl next year. I could put it that way. For sure. So these are the people that in one way are greatly inspirational to us, and we like to read their books and we go, wow, incredible. But at the very same time, they make us feel so guilty, like, sitting around on a Sunday doing nothing except watching the dumb Olympics and saying to myself, at this point, Booker T. Washington would have definitely gone fundraised somebody, probably in Boston or New York or Philadelphia. He wouldn't be sitting watching these guys run down a slope before they kill themselves, okay? And that's the problem with these guys. And that's why I say, they make us feel uncomfortable because, hey, if I could do it, you can do it. I mean, it's
so true.
But it's these people that are just, I'd like to focus on the first part, the inspirational part of it, that, Booker T. Washington was an incredible inspirational figure, in history, and showed us that, perseverance and dedication and just pushing along, you could be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Because later on, he became a great speaker and all of that. Later on, it doesn't when he was a great speaker as a kid, and then they said, "Oh, look at his great speaker," and then they appointed him. Every step of the way, he developed his character. Like running a school. How did he know how to run a school? He even admits, coming down to Alabama with nothing. If it wasn't for the general that that helped him out and all of that stuff.
So I think you're touching on a point that at one point I want to make, that he talks about in the book, where he talks about education not just being teaching people a skill or facts, but actually as a moral training ground. And I think there's a really interesting similarities between that and yeshiva. How it's not just about learning the facts and recitation of, facts and figures and those sorts of things, but it's actually about how to live your life. And I think he really viewed, when he was at Tuskegee, not just teaching women how to be seamstresses and men how to be bricklayers, but actually how to live a good life.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think one of the incredible points that he did was made sure that everybody worked. Besides taking classes in mathematics, whatever classes they took, they actually did physical manual work. I mean, the buildings were built by them.
Right.
I mean, like you became a bricklayer. This is something that differentiates from yeshiva, because in yeshiva, you come there, you sit for 9 years, on your, sitting and reading the books. If they told you, what, your son is going to come here, yes, you're going to spend $20,000 for tuition. And by the way, he's going to build his own dormitory room and his bed. And your daughter is going to sew her pillow, and her clothes. Go, really? So why am I paying you? And then you're going to grow your own food. I mean, that was, I think, a novelty that struck me as being something that we're missing today. That, that, you know what, we're not out there. We don't know how to do anything.
I know.
I mean,
Mhm.
the average guy doesn't know. I mean, to change a light bulb is like,
Yeah.
how do I do that? I got to call an electrician, or you know, on a change. Like I had last week a little trouble with the flow of my water in my sink. It was, what do you call that?
The pressure.
The pressure was low. I happened to be lucky that the plumber was in my house for another thing. I said, how do you do this? In 2 seconds, he fixed it.
Right.
He had a key, he turned it. Next thing I heard, 10 seconds, the pressure is gushing. I mean, I felt like an idiot standing over there. He says you can buy these keys at Lowe's, and all you're going to do is just open up the valve, and it's going to help, you know. But those kind of things, which I found incredible, you know, the kind of education like you were saying, Jay, is that he absolutely insisted that you're not only going to take classes, but you're also going to work, whether, you know, bricklaying, whatever else they had to do over there, you know, woodwork, you know, sewing, this, that. I mean, and that gave, so if you were not able to even get a good education, let's say you flunked out, but at least you were a bricklayer. Like one of his sons didn't one of his sons say to him that he wants to become like one of the, like an architect or something like that? And he knew already this, that I thought was incredible. That's something
I think
that
about it a lot.
we don't.
I think about this a lot because I think there is something extremely important about manual labor, and we just don't have that anymore. It's not like, and I don't know what we replace it with, and how do we, and I know just from my working with my college students that, you know, some of my college students, not all of them, but some of them would do so much better if they were actually busy with manual labor every day. And, you know, we're doing a job where they were working with their hands, working outside, you know, building stuff. You feel accomplished, you feel motivated, but we've lost that. And we've ridiculed it. I know. It makes me nervous.
And I think in Judaism as well.
Yeah.
You know, we agree. Manual labor, that's like, farmers like an amaretz, you know, an ignoramus. Okay, if you can't do anything else, okay, go plant corn in the field, or, you know, do something like that, become a plumber, you know, something like that. We look down at it. But believe me, when your toilet is stuffed, you're not looking down at the plumber.
No, it's true.
You know, you're thank you so much for showing up.
Believe me, when you have a son sitting in his bedroom playing video games 12 hours a day, you dream that he would be outside doing anything, or anywhere doing anything other than that. And I wonder if there's a way that we can incorporate back into our culture this idea of manual labor, and and especially for boys, to give boys something to do that doesn't require them looking at a screen. I just kept thinking about that. Booker T. Washington, if he opened a school today, it would be a whole different world, because it would everyone be sitting by a computer. And it just doesn't have the same.
He wouldn't allow. He wouldn't have allowed that.
Allowed it. Right.
He wouldn't have allowed. Right. You would have one class on computers, but the rest of the time you'd be out there woodworking, fixing a car, planting whatever it was. There is in Israel. There's a school. I think it's called Menzel Lamlacha in Kfar Chabad. Yeah. There is they started in the fees. You know, a school, a technical school for training people how to work, and, you know, maybe in printing, whatever it was. So there were some schools that taught technical training, but that was never your first choice. That was like, if you didn't get into yeshiva and were able to sit 12 hours a day, you know, studying, the guy's not going to make it. So put him into the technical school. That was like, okay, if, you know, like you were like a minor leaguer. You weren't in the major leagues.
We really need it more than ever, honestly.
But so there, I found even separated.
I was going to say, but you even look at the early Zionists, and the kibbutz movements,
yes,
and the Mashavs, and you just look at. I mean, that's the kind of work that Washington was talking about. Like, build something yourself, and it gives you a sense of pride. And the other piece, I think it's interesting, and actually, so I've talked a lot about, when we've talked about Israel, and how how I'm not really concerned about Israel in the long term, because Israel's useful and they produce things that people want.
Yes.
The first place I really came across that idea was this book, and him talking about how it's interesting, because at the time he was sort of in this intellectual debate with W.B. Du Bois, who was the other prominent Black thinker at post emancipation, and W.B. Du Bois really talked about he had this 10% plan where he wanted the top 10% of Black people to be educated, take a generation to educate those people, and then they can educate all the other Black people.
Right.
And Booker T. Washington's stance was, no, we need to get people educated now in a way that they can, A, find pride in what they're doing, but also become useful.
Yeah.
And the way that Black people integrate themselves into society is not just out of the graciousness of people's hearts, but by actually making themselves indispensable, by becoming bricklayers or carpenters or whatever, and then going to a town and being the best bricklayer or carpenter in that town. That's how they will become part of their communities, is by being indispensable to the communities. And it's just such a great message that he
And
taught
that
his students.
because it fulfills two missions, I think, two in one with one thing. Number one, it gives you some kind of a technical advantage. I mean, you have a skill, you're going out there. Then that's number one. But number two is, like you said, it makes you indispensable. And I found this personally to be a little bit naive on his end, that the white people automatically would, hey, you know what, if the best Black plumber in some small town in Alabama, I'm going to hire him. Mm-hmm. I don't think that was really the case. If you had just come down and you knew nothing about the Civil War and nothing about this, and you just read this book, Up from Slavery, right, you would figure that, you know what, it wasn't that bad. The racism wasn't that bad. I mean, there was slavery, and he talks about how poor he was. But afterwards, if you read it through the way he describes it, that, hey, you know what, look, people will automatically, why wouldn't they? I mean, if you're the best plumber, or you're the best bricklayer, or you're a good teacher or a good doctor, people are automatically gonna come to you, But I don't think that was really the case back there. I mean, this was during Reconstruction. I mean, Jim Crow laws were in effect. I mean, it was a completely two society living down, in the South. I mean, the racism was, the lynching, which he barely talks about. He talks about it only really in the last chapter of his book, was going on. I mean, for nothing. I mean, they were lynching people, for nothing. I thought that was a little bit Pollyannish on his thing, to think that they were gonna, they were just gonna make yourself useful and they'll accept you.
But it's interesting you're saying that, because I would think you would find that refreshing, because you would say the same thing if you were writing a book about Jewish life. You would ignore the majority of anti-Semitism. You wouldn't want to focus on the anti-Semitism and sort of what the problems were. And Booker T. Washington was sort of like, look, he doesn't explicitly say this, but I think implicitly he's saying, I know that there's going to be racism and there are going to be really horrible people, and it's not going to be easy every day for everyone, but let's focus on how we can do our part to be to be better and to do what we need to do to build ourselves up. The same way you always say about the Jewish community, like, why spend so much time focused on, everyone who hates us or everything, that gets thrown at us? No, we have to build our communities and we have to live, good and successful and fulfilling lives. The rest of it is their problem. It's not a me problem. It's a them problem. I sort of read it like that. It's interesting that you see it in the other way.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think if you make yourself useful, people should.
Right. Should.
People should.
Yeah.
I mean, and I believe that in the Jewish community, when we were here in the United States of America, we did that.
Yeah.
We integrated well, right. We educated ourselves, right. We became very useful. We helped the country. We elevated people. We came with innovations, and we have nothing to be shy about the Jewish community. It was also much easier for us to integrate.
To blend in,
right. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's
for sure.
You could, you just changed your name and then ate shrimp, and then no one never knew that you were, your grandfather was a pisher in one, in that they couldn't,
right.
Do that. But I thought that his attitude when it came to the white people, it's one thing when you say to the black people that, that, they're going to push hard and they're going to work hard and they're going to, he envisioned that blacks and whites will be living together. Right. They'll be integrated, neighborhoods, in the South. and and they're just gonna say to themselves, the whites, well, you know what, look, what were we thinking?
Right.
What were we thinking?
You think he was a bit naive?
See, I think so, because it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I mean, the whites were never really willing to see the black people as equals. I mean, we had even to very recently with George Wallace. I mean, what was it, 40 years ago, 50 years ago? George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, talked about this, segregation, that, okay, they're here, fine, all right. But we're not equal. We're just not equal. You have to go to your own schools. You got to go to your own restaurants. I mean, think that's 100 years after Booker T. Washington. What?
Even George Wallace changed.
Yeah, George Wallace changed. I know.
But
I get it.
But
I get it. But you're saying,
right.
See, the other option would have been, like, today it's much more, militant. I mean, we want our rights, not because because I'm a human being.
Right.
Whether I do anything or don't do anything, I have the same right to go to university, or I have the same right to go anywhere that you have. But the problem with you is that you're an inherent racist. That's today's view, of race relationships in America. It's a much more militant. I mean, they would look at this and they would say, why is he even trying to kiss up to the whites? Like trying to, make us indispensable so the white people will accept us. Forget it. Don't accept us. We don't care. But you're not going to block us from our natural rights that we have as citizens of the United States. That's what I'm saying. I thought that he was.
But I think there's also something, because he writes about that when they first started Tuskegee,
right?
That when he first started it, the people in the community were skeptical, obviously. But when they saw what was being built, and that they were dedicated and that they were capable, the people from the community, a lot of whom were former slaveholders, came and wanted to help. And so I'm sure there's some degree of Pollyannish perspective there, but I also think there is his experience of actually running the school and actually building people up in the way that he envisions, that he saw it was effective. I don't think he would ever say, I'm assuming, that he could get rid of all racists and that there would never be a George Wallace ever again. But I think he saw this as the best way to get equality was to not just demand it, but show that they were equal and in some regard superior, which is, I think, another part of the book that I think is really fascinating, is his empathy for the whites in after the Civil War.
That was shocking. That was another shocking thing.
And talking about how he thought they were actually much worse off in a lot of regards than the former slaves, because the slaveholders were useless. They couldn't do anything.
Right.
And so they were just destitute. They couldn't do anything for themselves, where at the very least the slaves had skills that they had acquired because they were slaves. And I thought his empathy for the former slaveholders is, I mean, could not ever envision myself having that level of grace.
I mean, it's
really amazing.
It was some of the way he was describing that after the war, how the former slaves would actually support the slave owners. I mean, and also not only that, but even during the war, when wounded Confederate soldiers would come, the slaves would actually tend to them, and heal them and sit with them while they were sick. I mean, that to me was like, because I'm from the school of Simon Legree. Like every slaveholder was a horrible, terrible, vicious, cruel master that just beat them, and then that's what I was. You're taught that, right? You think that these slaves were literally held in prison, and not only in prison, but a torturous prison, where you did any infraction, they buried you into a hole in the ground, and you had to sit there for in the heat, or they beat you, and they And then all of a sudden to read this, that they would help the Confederate soldiers. If you gave the analogy, I know that it's not analogous, and don't get me wrong by any stretch of the imagination, but if you compared it to the Nazis and the Jews, where where they were enslaving the Jews. Could you imagine that a Nazi coming home, and the Jewish, and after the war, and the Jew helping him, the first thing a Jew would take a knife from the kitchen and check him.
Right.
Then that was, oh, your foot is hurting. Here, let me help you with the foot and just cut the toe off, or stick a knife in you. I mean, I don't see the Jews after being liberated from Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, and Majdanek and Treblinka, where they were actually bringing food for the commandant, of that. So to me, that was like so strange. But like you say, Jay, I mean, he had a completely different view. I'm not so sure if I would be so magnanimous, afterwards. And also, I would, I mean, I'm not going to, but I would like to do a little research of when the school started, the reaction of the people. He says they were skeptical. Skeptical is a very nice word. I mean, skeptic means you're sitting at home and you're saying to yourself, nah, that's not going to work. Okay. Or like that,
Right.
That's skeptical. I'd like to know what actually happened. Did they ever burn down the school? Did they ever break the windows of the school?
Right.
What was the reaction of the white population around the school? What they give? But
a lot of the reaction from the whites that we remember, like that we've seen video and
Right.
pictures of horrible behavior from white people in the 60s, especially, right? And in the 50s and 60s. I mean, that was already later, and a reaction to the realities that were going on in the South, in the 50s and 60s.
Sure.
The Black community was much bigger. They were becoming more affluent. They were moving into different new neighborhoods. And the white people, I think, were struggling. I don't want to make excuses for their disgusting behavior, but, they were having their own economic downturn. And you can see when you watch videos of the crowds, running at not just the police, even just the white people, the way the famous video of the kids coming to school, on that day, and you see the hatred on the faces of the white people. I don't know if that was the reaction of people right after the Civil War. I don't think it was quite like that. That's something that grew over time in the South, and that white people actually became, a segment of the white community became worse and more racist. And, and it's interesting what role religion plays, actually, because I think there's an interesting piece here where everybody was using religion to justify their behavior.
Well,
both in the white churches, they were saying one message of God, and in the Black churches, for sure. I mean, they were, preaching a message of God, of love and liberation and justice. And so it's interesting how religion plays a part, I think a big part in this whole story.
Well, that's very true, because during the debates about emancipation, I mean, both sides used the Bible to butter their arguments. And you could read about debates that were going on, great debates before, abolitionists and anti-abolitionists, both would use the Bible, to say, this is what God ordained and this is the way it should be. I mean, so we can understand the anti-abolitionists, freedom for everybody, meaning, across some drawer, you have to, Jubilee year is freedom for everybody, and everybody has to be free. But the anti-abolitionists, and what are you talking about? And the Bible's full of slavery. The slavery's all over the place. It's a natural thing in humankind.
It is. I mean, because then you get even more extreme. You get like John Brown. Who, I mean, he was so anti-slavery. I mean, there were circumstances where he was in Kansas, and this was when Kansas was sort of up for grabs at this point.
Yeah.
And he and his sons dragged people out of their houses and murdered them.
Right.
Yes.
For being slaveholders. And and the other thing that's interesting is in college, I wrote several papers on Frederick Douglass, and it's interesting about how his perspective on religion changed. That in his first autobiography, he writes about how Christianity is the slaveholder religion, and how people would whip slaves while quoting Bible verses. And so he was very anti-religious. But then he went to England and saw that entire anti-slavery movement was a Christian-led movement.
Oh, interesting.
And so he realized that, it was sort of in the eye of the beholder, that it could be used for evil, or it could be used for good.
Yeah.
And so it's just sort of just on that religion point, it can go either way.
Can I ask you a question, actually? So in the Torah, I mean, when it talks about slaves, I was always under the impression, and I'm asking this specifically about the way I was educated. I was always under the impression that the idea of slaves in the Torah was more of like a servant, meaning like it was an economic relationship. It wasn't chattel slavery the way that we had it here in America, where you owned the human, and then when they had a child, you owned the child, and you owned the family, and it was generational, went from generation to generation. In the Torah, it was a very different type of. Am I wrong or right?
You're right and wrong.
Okay.
You're right when it came to Jewish slaves.
Okay.
Because Jewish slaves could only be there for a certain amount of time, 6 years or till Yovel, till Jubilee year. But common slaves, Canaanite slaves, let's just say, they were generational. It says in Leviticus, you have them forever. I mean, from one and to another, you actually owned them. Whatever the slave had, it was yours. The slave found a diamond ring in the street, it was yours. The slave worked, it was yours. All of that. Now, you can free him. You had a right to free him, but why would you?
And all the rules in the Torah about how to treat a slave.
No, that you had to treat
that
them.
That was for everyone, right?
That you had to treat them normally.
Okay.
That you couldn't beat them and do that. But you could make them do like whatever work you wanted to do, like carry my clothes to the bathhouse.
Right.
Like tie my shoes. Right. All of that stuff. Those kind of humiliating jobs that no one really wants to do. They did that. They did that for them. Right. You couldn't mistreat them because that's a basic premise in the Torah, is to treat every human being with respect. But they were actually owned by you.
Right.
When I owned by you and their children and their grandchildren,
I didn't realize that.
Et cetera, all the way, all the way down. So that's why the Bible could be used, on both sides. I just want to change just direction just in a second, because one of the things that I found that was really in line with what Yiddishkeit is all about is this idea that we talked about before of being productive, just being productive. And the Torah says that what is the purpose of mankind? What is the purpose? Adam Amol Yuvalid. A person was created to produce, to work. I mean, even someone that's born into money, like, who doesn't have to work, it's a crime according to the Torah not to do anything. Now, work is a very relative term. What is production? So, like, for example, if the Rambam said to you, hey, you know what, I want to go into bricklaying, what would if you were a guidance counselor, you would say, look, Rav Moshe, I appreciate the fact that you want to be a bricklayer, but it's much more important for you to write the Yad HaChazaka. Right. I think you'll have a much bigger impact if you start writing, the laws of halacha to do this. Right. If Beethoven came to you and said, you know what, I'd really like to be a baker. I'd really like a cinnamon bun, and I think I could really make a good cinnamon bun. You would say to him, first of all, whatever your name was, Beethoven.
Imagine if his cinnamon bun was as good as his
music.
It
could have changed the history of cinnamon buns. We'll never know. But you would say to him, that's not you. Right. So that kind of work, of producing great music or producing great literature, or that stuff, we don't think of that as manual labor, but you certainly needed a certain amount of people, to do that, to make the world a good place to live. But for most of us, even when you're doing that kind, it's still, you have to be productive. And I think that he over and over and over emphasizes that point. That's what a human being is all about, to get in there, to wake up in the morning, to know that first thing you're going to do is do something for get out there, whether you're planting, whether you're painting, whether you're this, whether you're that. That manual labor is part of your humanity, part of what makes you a human being. It's not something that's, I'm a human being and then I'm going to work somewhat. You got to be productive. And this was like when Jay said about, him and the Rebbe, the commonalities. This isn't something the Rebbe stressed over and over and over again. Remember at his 80th birthday, Farbrengen, he was 80 and he was mentioning that people are writing into him, telling him to slow down. He's 80 years old. And the Rebbe said, I'm just getting started. Oh, you're kidding? At 80 is he didn't say the news 40, but he said, well, I got so much more to do and went to do it, because this was his motto, that, if you're around, whatever you are, be productive, produce something, because that makes you a human being.
This goes right to one of the biggest debates going on right now in our world is, as we transition into this world of AI and literally into artificial intelligence. And I think people who roll their eyes and think this isn't an important discussion are really burying their heads in the sand. But, humanity all along went from, working in the fields and or whatever, from hunting and gathering to agriculture to manufacturing to, there was always something to do when the next thing came. And I think we're standing at a great unknown right now. And what does being useful actually mean as a human being when almost everything that we need to do to function on a daily basis right now is going to be done through artificial intelligence? What does that leave us? And how does that how do we raise a generation? I mean, what's going to be in 2 or 3 or 4 generations? I can't even begin to imagine. I'm just thinking about, my future grandchildren right now. How do you raise a human being to feel productive and worth it and part of, what you're describing, like a society that values you and that you have something important to contribute when almost everything is going to be done through artificial intelligence? I really worry about this. And when I was reading Up From Slavery, I thought about that a lot, because how do we transition into this new world? It makes me really nervous. I've stumped everyone.
It's
There's silence.
Yeah. I mean, there's always studying Gemara.
Yeah.
What do you mean? That will never go out of style.
Right.
I mean, you're going to sit there and, your robot will deliver your coffee and bagel, and you're going to sit there and then he'll take your shoes off, and then your other robot will do your laundry for you. You'll have so much more. You'll have so much more time to daven better, to learn better, to do more mitzvahs better. I mean, you'll have more time that, to travel, to explore.
That's
I mean,
true.
if that's true, we still don't know. I mean, we have to be prepared, and you're absolutely right. We shouldn't go into this, blindsided, and then all of a sudden we're having that 25% unemployment here, in the United States. That's not going to be good for the Jews, But if you say to yourself, hey, you know what, this will give us more time to do the things that we really, really care about, maybe that will be a good thing. Maybe like travel, we will do more traveling. Traveling will become easier than it is today. Today it's horrible.
Maybe focusing on family also.
Family, and doing more things, spending more time with your family.
But it has always been one of those questions about, like, when they talk about UBI, universal basic income, where there's this idea that the government will just sort of pay everyone, this amount to live, and then just, you don't have to work because there's just not really that kind of work available. But it goes to what your point was, like, what does that mean to a human being that you just don't have a purpose?
That would be devastating. I mean, if people didn't have to work or do something, it would. Maybe we're just going to have to enact. Like, I know right now there's a great debate about, like the AI, whether we should, regulate it, or we should just, this is like a free market, do whatever you want. Maybe the government is going to have to step in and say, hey, we're going to put some limitations on it, and what it could do, and what it's going to do, and how it's going to do. I mean, you don't know, but maybe that's going to have to be. I mean, because with this new technology, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, when okay, you'll put all the robots in Detroit and eliminate all of the human manufacturers of cars. It'll all be done by technology, and one glitch, it's over. You're going to have 100,000 cars that don't have any power steering, and you have a good day.
Yeah, but the problem is that that's not what's happening. I mean, it's
no, because you still have human beings.
No, but it's being replaced. Most people are being. There's a whole study about Waymos. These are driverless Ubers,
right?
And they are far less. They get into far less accidents. There's it's
much safer.
Incredible. It's so much safer. So imagine the day that all cars are self-driving and you don't have any.
Imagine the day that
taxi drivers.
someone cracks the code for Waymo, and starts to mess around with the internals, and what you can do, what damage you can do. And so
it's I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but I do think there's going to have to be a societal shift in how and what people spend their time on, and I think it's going to be. There's going to be a change, and who knows what it's going to be. Right. But there's going to have to be societal change. I think the concept of the knowledge worker is going to change dramatically.
Right.
And how many of them there are and what they're doing. And I think it's going to be a dramatic change in that regard.
I have a question that's totally off this topic, but it's about the book, and I'm curious if you guys have an opinion on this. So one of the things that I find, and I love reading biographies, and I really love autobiographies because you get to see somebody in a different way. But I always wonder when you're reading an autobiography if it's useful as a historical record. Because if I was writing an autobiography about myself, I mean, I would, I would want to create the best version of ChayaLeah that exists. And I think like all of my storytelling and all of my perspective would be, slanted based on like how I want to be perceived to the world. I'm just curious if either of you have an opinion on that and like what you think.
I definitely thought that about this book.
Did you?
Yeah.
I think that every historical book, whether it's an autobiography or a biography or just documenting some historical events, the writer always has a perspective.
Right.
They always have their biases towards one direction or another, because you can't, in every book about every topic, things have to get left out. You can't, because otherwise everything's connected to everything and you could never finish a book, right? So there's always editorial decisions about perspective, what gets put in, what gets taken out. And obviously, in autobiographies, the writer, being the subject of the book, has a perspective that they want to communicate. But that's no different than any other. I think in autobiographies, in some ways, it's actually better because the bias is clear. Like you know going into it what the bias is.
Yeah.
In other histories, you kind of have to, glean what the biases are.
Right.
And it's not as straightforward. So yeah, I think autobiographies are very useful as historical records. Just like with any other book of history, you have to read it with an eye towards any documentary, right?
Right.
This person has a perspective and they're writing a book that is, whether explicitly or at least implicitly, directed by what their perspective and their biases are.
Yeah.
It's hard to disagree with Jay on this point. I did find the book a little self-serving. I mean, just basically like every time he made a speech and people didn't like it, but then eventually they liked it. I mean, he spoke,
Sure.
and they didn't like it, but then a week later, a guy wrote in the paper, they liked it. His biggest critic hated the book, but then he spoke to him and he liked him. Then he came to the North and Boston, they loved him. He went to Europe, they couldn't get enough of him. I mean, I think it was a little bit, there's not one case, I was trying to find one case where at the end didn't work out well for him, where they chased him out of town on a rail and they said, you're a useless bum, get out of here, we don't want to hear from you anymore. It didn't happen that way. Anytime he had any difficulties, it seemed to have worked out. Like all of his enemies. I mean, that's okay. But I can't imagine that in no place, the guy was ridiculed and chased out and it didn't work out for him and they still hated him, for what it is. That I find that a little, because I'm a cynical guy to begin with.
Right.
So I'm just thinking about if another guy wrote a book parallel to him, another autobiography of Shmerel Tamarkin, knew Booker T. Washington and kind of followed him all the way around. And this Shmerel wrote, you know what? I remember when he was in Boston, they chased him out and they were throwing apples at him, and it didn't work out so well for him. I'm just thinking, but like Jay said it correctly, and I agree 100%. Anybody who writes a book is going to be a little slanted, but overall, it's hard to.
If there's one trait that Booker T. Washington clearly had, it was optimism.
And confidence.
I mean, that is clearly his dominant personality trait. Is he was
for sure. For that, you got to give him 100% credit. And I mean, there's no way around the fact that he was a great man and an incredible human being.
And a great fundraiser. I was thinking a lot how everybody who fundraises needs to read this book, because I really appreciated some of those parts where he describes, his.
And think about it, he wasn't like a natural. It wasn't.
No,
he didn't come from money. He didn't know anything. Right. I mean, he was scared like everybody else going into somebody, asking for money or money. But he had this magnetic personality, obviously, where white women from the North were like throwing money at this guy. I mean, they couldn't give him enough money. They came down to Alabama. How much do you need? Here's more money. I mean, it was like amazing how much money he was able to raise during that time.
There's also, I want one comment on that. I think it's important to note is, I think that is really the idea that success follows success.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
And that if you can build something successful, everybody wants on board.
That's so true.
And
it's so true.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
We always said success is a
Yes.
bastard
Yeah.
and failure is an orphan.
Yeah.
That's that the way it is. It also talks a little bit, but again, not explicitly, the northern guilt.
Yes.
The white northern guilt for slavery. The South not so much.
Yeah.
And they should be the ones feeling it, but the North felt this overwhelming, guilt that what we did to these poor people. And and how are we going to rectify that? By throwing money at them. Yeah. Here, Booker, take another 1,000, take another. Right. I mean, I think $1,000 in those days. And a guy gave him $10,000, $25,000. I mean, you're talking about millions today, like literally millions today. And they were just throwing at him. So, which teaches another lesson. If you could get people to feel guilty for what they did to you, like the German government after World War II, here's money. Just don't mention the number 6 million anymore. Go from 5 million to 7 million. Take out the 6 million number from your equation. Totally. But here's money. Here, Mrs. Perelmuter, here's money for what we did for you. Forget about your 85 first cousins that were killed. No, it doesn't matter.
So I want to
do that to people. You're gonna milk them.
I want to read one short section from the book. This book, almost every page of the book, there's something quotable from it. It's incredible. But there's one section I want to read that I think is phenomenal. And he writes, "I tried to picture myself in the position of a boy or man with an honored and distinguished ancestry, which I could trace back through a period of hundreds of years, and who had not only inherited the name, but fortune and a proud family homestead. And yet I have sometimes had the feeling that if I inherited these and been a member of a more popular race, I should have been inclined to yield to the temptation of depending upon my ancestry and my color to do that for me, which I should do for myself. I resolved that because I had no ancestry myself, I would leave a record which my children would be proud, which might encourage them to still follow."
No.
It's
excellent.
Incredible.
Excellent. Of course, we have to tie it to Judaism. I mean, somehow that statement. So we know that the successor of the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid of Mezrich, came from a long line, illustrious line of people, and had a book actually called Sefer Yuchsin, where he can trace back where he came from. And unfortunately, it was burnt in a fire. And he was a little boy in the house burnt down, and with it, the book was burnt. His mother was outside the house, and she was crying. And there's a story. Maybe it's a bit, like, what do you call it? Fable. But he stood there and he said, "Ma, why are you crying?" And she said, "Because we know a lot of things got burned, but the Sefer Yuchsin, the book of our heritage." And she said, "Don't worry, I'll start a new line." He said that to her. Right. I'll start a new line of Yuchsin, things. So when it turned out to be the Maggid of Mezrich, I mean, okay, you could do worse. You can do worse than the successor of the Baal Shem Tov. So. The same thing over there that what Booker was saying was, if had he come from a long line, he would have relied on the line and he wouldn't have been able to accomplish. So you know what? He started out there, and good for him. I mean, because we need people like that. They're inspirational. They show us a way that, you can do it. If you set your mind to it. The Rebbe quoted the Gemara 1,000,000 times. If you strive and succeed, believe them. If someone says I've strove and I haven't succeeded, or if someone says I haven't striven and I've succeeded, don't believe them. But if someone says to you, I've striven and I have succeeded, Yogaita Tamin. And the Rebbe emphasized, doesn't say they were successful. Never someone successful, believe them. It says Yogaita, just put the hard work in. Yogaita Matzasa, and you found Tamin. You
talk about like a moral education. I mean, the quote you're saying right now is a line I've known by heart my whole life.
Right.
We were taught it over and over and over again, that as long as you try, really try, not fake try, but really try,
you will find
some success in something. And definitely a big part of our education.
Just like here, I mean, if you look at the schedule, if you put a schedule like he said about the school, 5 o'clock getting up and working till 9 o'clock. If you did that today to a college student, he would look at you and said, "What are you, nuts?" What is not a prison? My parents are paying $60,000 getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
But I think this quote from his is so important for people today, where there's this idea of, Nepo babies,
Yeah.
and and these people that everything's rigged against me because I wasn't born with this thing or that thing or this other thing or whatever. And he not only says that obviously he wasn't born with those things, but he looked at it as a benefit because he had the opportunity to build something that his children will be proud of from him, not some legacy somebody built 15 generations ago, but his children will be proud of what he was able to build and the name he was able to create for them.
Totally.
And
100%.
it's just this idea of resilience and looking forward and not looking back at all of these grievances that everybody can look back in their lives. And obviously there's varying degrees, but everyone can look back in their lives and look at ways they were slighted or some benefit they didn't get because of whatever reason. But what does that get you? It doesn't get you anything. Like what's the point? Like look through the windshield, put those things behind you, and just keep working and build something that you can be proud of and that your family can be proud of. And that's it.
Absolutely.
I definitely recommend this book. Everyone should read it. It's short. It's not
easy read.
Yeah,
very easy.
It's worth having, and it's really I got a lot out of the book. And I would plug one other book because I besmirched autobiographies, and I do want to point out one autobiography that I've read in my life that I thought was incredible, and everybody who's read it will, I think, agree. And it's because he really is honest about himself. He gives you all from A to Z, warts and all.
I know you're gonna say
who are you gonna?
Andre Agassi.
Yes, Andre Agassi's autobiography is the best autobiography I've ever read. And it's honestly,
you could get him on the show if you.
Oh my God, I wish.
He's still living.
I wish, but he's so honest in his book, and it's really what I loved about it because he doesn't try to paint himself in any way. That is anyway. So read Up From Slavery, and then also read Andre Agassi's, the tennis player. Read his autobiography.
Yes. Is he the one married to Steffi Graf?
Yeah.
He's married to Steffi Graf.
Yeah. It's an amazing book. You can listen to it also.
Yes. So yeah, highly recommend this book. Everyone should read it. Everyone's kids should read it.
Yes.
It's whatever you've come through in your life, there is an extraordinarily low likelihood it's been more difficult than what Booker T. Washington came through in his life.
Yeah.
Good point.
So you can do it.
You said it best. We have unfortunately fallen into this victim mentality. Like the bumper sticker says, to get into an accident is human. To find someone to blame it on, that's genius. Okay, that's basically what the way we've lived in our society. The grievances is a billion. If only the world is against me. It's and then he's the poster boy for against that,
right?
Totally against that. Wow,
100%.
Wow,
100%.
Well, thank you.
I have to be on. Can I do something honest?
Yes. I
was very skeptical, to use a word about what he was about skepticism, that we would be able to do this podcast and get through it. I thought that after 20 minutes of discussing Booker T. Washington, we finally fall into another, okay, let's talk about anti-Semitism, nothing else to talk about Booker T. Washington. Let's do to our normal topic, why they hate the Jews. Why does everybody hate the Jews? But somehow, I mean, it was, look, he did it. Booker, I'm looking at you right now. Thank you very much. You did it.
A Hasidic rabbi spent an hour.
He would come back.
It would be something.
He'd come back.
Yes.
He'd be proud.
Absolutely. He would be proud.
Learn from every single person, right? That's what
Kol Malamda Yiskanta, from everything I learned.
You could learn something from everyone and everything.
Yep,
so.
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing us this book, Jay.
Thank you so much, Jay. This was a pleasure.
Good. I'm glad you guys liked it, and everyone should read it for sure.
Thanks.
So, all right.
Until next time, have a wonderful day.